Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll begin with chapter 8, verse 1. Chapter 8, verse 1. The rains of the flood have come in a very significant way. And God, of course, allowed Noach and all those on the ark with him to survive. In chapter 8, verse 1, it says, Vayizkor Elokim es Noach, God remembered Noach, and all the animals with him in the ark. God brought a wind upon the earth, and the waters subsided. Now we know that when it says in the Torah that God remembered, we talk about this a lot in the context of the high holiday davening. Zichronos is the section in Rosh Hashanah Musaf. When it says in the Torah that God remembered, we know it doesn't mean that it totally slipped God's mind. It's, oh gosh, I just forgot. Now I remember. We know that's not what it means. We know that what it means for God to remember is God is judging an entity and saying that based on whatever the person has done before, whatever the person has experienced, whatever has transpired, now the person deserves X. That's what it means when it talks about God remembered. Of course, it's very meaningful to think about what it means that he remembered Noach. Noach had conducted himself in such a different way than the other people of his times. What in the world does it mean that he remembered the animals? What does that mean? The animals did tshuva. The animals did a mitzvah today. What do the words even mean? If memory doesn't mean that God remembered what he had forgotten, so what does memory mean here? So if you look at the second Rashi on Pasuk Aleph, Vayizkor Elokim es Noach, Ma zachar lohem labahemos. What did God remember for the animals? Schos shelo hishchitzu darkem kodam lachein v'shelo shimshu b'teva. A very, very interesting Rashi. Rashi said a similar thing earlier in the parsha. We did not see this together. But Rashi says that the animals that were saved in the flood were animals that did not have sexual relations with other species. And the point is that the sexual immorality set by humanity of the time spread even to other life forms. So Rashi says, what do you mean? What did God remember about the animals? I already told you that these animals were the ones who did not practice sexual immorality in terms of going between species. So that's what God remembered about them. And that there was no cohabitation on the Teva in general. It was considered to be insensitive, inappropriate. The world is being destroyed all around them, and whoever's on the Teva is just going to, experience certain pleasures. It's not appropriate. So Rashi says that there were significant merits for these specific animals. It's a very interesting thing to think about. Let's go to the Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. The Ramban. Vayizkor Elokim es Noach v'eskol hachayav v'eskol ha'beima. Haschira ban Noach mreisha haya tzadik tamim v'karas lo bris latzilos. The Ramban says, okay, so I understand what it means that God remembered Noach. Noach was this great person, and that God had made a covenant with him that he would save him. So there's a lot to remember with Noach. V'Noach yichlo zaru asher itosham. By the way, it's not only that God saved Noach, God saved Noach's family. So even though it's not mentioned in the pasuk here, but his family is included with him. V'lo yiskirim. Why does it not say? It says he remembers the animals. Why didn't it say it remembered Noach's family? Ki b'schuso nitzolu. Because the bottom line is the reason why Noach's family was saved was in the merit of Noach. It really wasn't in their own merits. It was in the merit of Noach. So God decided to save Noach and by extension his family. But the remembering in the context of the animals, Ramban says that's not that the animals had a merit. He's saying differently than Rashi. The only life form in this world that has merits or demerits is a human being, not animals. What it means that God remembered the animals is God remembered his own word in creating the world. God remembered his will in creating the world and having all these different life forms. And he reflected on how continuously worthwhile it is to have all these different species in the world. So now God says, okay, now it's time to let the animals out so that they'll begin to survive and flourish on the earth. You might wonder, it doesn't talk about the birds, doesn't talk about the creatures that creep on the land. Because we already get the point. We talked about the animals. It's understood that it means all life forms. So very, very different shot than Rashi. Rashi said the animals did have merits. God said, rather Ramban says they didn't have merits. It means that God remembered his original desire to have all these creatures in the world. That's the Ramban. Now let's see the Orach Chaim. First Orach Chaim on Pasuk Aleph, but we're going to jump in the second shot in the Orach Chaim, in the first Orach Chaim, if you're not confused yet. So it's something like the 6th, 7th line in, beginning with the words Od Yirtzeh. In mine, it's the second paragraph. Od Yirtzeh al Zaderech. There's another way you can understand this. Vayizkor Elokim es Noach. Not only did God remember Noach in his own right, Gam Zochar Kol HaTorach v'Ha'ol Asher Olav Mibahema B'Achai. A really interesting Shan Orach Chaim. So Orach Chaim says, doesn't mean God remembered A, Noach, and B, the animals. No, God remembered what Noach had done before the flood began. And now God remembers what Noach did in context with the animals, the tremendous burden that Noach had all of these months, Asheri Toba Teva, that he had been with these animals all these months. So now God decides to have mercy on Noach and end the flood so Noach can get off of Teva and be freed from having to be literally the zookeeper on the ark. Gambozeh kala remez litzara shemitzaso l'Noach me'ari asher ikisho v'nistakin b'teva l'rov tosefes tirdaso. Very, very famous medrash. I'm sure many of you have heard of it before, that Noach was attacked by the lion on the ark. So the Orach Chaim just says that medrash fits very well with this idea over here. So Rashi says the animals had merits. Ramban says God just remembered his original desire to have animals in the world. And the Orach Chaim says God remembered Noach's effort in taking care of the animals on the ark. Okay. Let's go to verse 21. Still in chapter 8, but verse 21. Noach has gotten off of the ark. Noach has brought sacrifices to God. Remember, we discussed the fact earlier in the week that God sort of hinted to Noach that there was a value in sacrifices. Now in 21 it says, "Vayarach Hashem reach hanichalach." Excuse me. God smelled the good scent of the sacrifices. Vayomer Hashem el libo, and God said, literally to his heart. It means God said to himself, "Lo osif l'kalalotis va'adama bavur ha'adam." I will no longer curse the earth for the sake of man. Ki yetzer leiv ha'adam ra minu rav, because man starts off with this evil inclination. V'lo osif od lakos es kol chai kasher asisi, and I will no longer decimate the life on earth as I have done. Okay, very important pasuk. That phrase is such an interesting phrase. What does it mean? God said to himself. So let's put it this way. So if God said it to himself, when did God reveal this statement to mankind, to humanity? When did that occur? We're reading it in Chumash. So obviously it's not only God speaking to himself, because it's in print. So when, if ever, was it shared with anyone else? Just a technical question, but an interesting one. Ramban on Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Vayomer Hashem el libo. Lo gila hadavar l'navi b'zmanahu. So the Ramban says the pshat of the pasuk is that there was no one to whom God revealed this message at that point in time. Rak biyom savoso es Moshe b'ksivas haTorah gilei love. The first human being that God revealed this to was Moshe when he was writing the Torah. Isn't that interesting? So all those generations later, God is telling Moshe what to write in the Torah, and that's the first time that a human being ever heard this statement from God. So at the time, in that generation, it was between God and himself, and later on, when the Torah was being written, it was revealed to Moshe to put in the Torah. Ki kasher hikriv Noach karbano Allah the fun of Luratzim, that when Noach brought these offerings, at that very moment, he brought out tremendous favor from God. The Gazash lo Yosef la kos es kochai, and at that moment, God decreed that he would not strike life again. That is what Ramban says. Look at the Sforno, the second Sforno on Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Vayomer Hashem el libo, shelo gila lenoach lubanav, ad shekiblu mitzvosav, vehekim bris. That it really wasn't revealed to Noach and his family until they accepted God's commandments. So he reveals it to Noach, but not at this moment. So a very different shot between the Ramban and the Sforno. Okay, now let's go on to chapter 9, verse 6. Chapter 9, verse 6. We have the very interesting statement made by God that now permission is granted to humanity to kill animals for the sake of eating them. Of course, that was not the case before this point in time, but the point is made very clearly that the permission is only to kill animals for the sake of eating them or for other benefits from the animals, but there's not permission granted to kill other human beings. Of course, nor is a human being permitted to kill themselves. Chapter 9, verse 6. Shofech dam ha'adam, a person who spills the blood of a human being, ba'adam damo yishafech. That's grounds to spill the person's own blood. In other words, a person deserves to be killed if they kill another human being. Why? Why is it so serious? Ki b'tselem elokim asas adam. Because God created humanity in the likeness of God, and that's why it's such a big deal to kill another human being. Interesting pasuk. I mean, it clearly is a statement, because you can't say because life is precious. If that's all you said, that's an incomplete answer. Because why? Well, why isn't the life of an animal precious? So the difference is because a human being is created with Tzelem Elokim. That's why the life of a human being is on a whole different scale. On this idea of Tzelem Elokim, we actually, I think, referenced it in Parshas Bereishis, but I just wanted to share this Sforno. It's the second Sforno on Pasuk Vav. Ki b'Tzelem Elokim. V'tama yos dam ha'adam nidrash, v'lo edrosh dam shar ba'alei chayim. The reason why the blood of a human being is so much more precious than the blood of other creatures. Ki b'Tzelem Elokim asa, because God made humanity in Tzelem Elokim. What does that mean? B'Tzelem ha'atzamim hanivdalim hanikraim Elohim asa eza mehem es ha'adam. So the point is that Elohim here, according to the Sforno, it does not mean God. It means an opportunity for eternity and to be more than a physical essence. So in other words, if a person does a good thing in this world, the goodness of what they did lives on forever. You could say in the impact in the soul, you could say it's impacting the world. That's not true for animals. An animal doesn't have such a concept. So it's not. So if a person kills an animal, of course we can't kill an animal for no reason, but if a person kills an animal, the animal's not alive anymore. If a person kills a human being, there was potential to do things that would impact eternity that has now been ended. So whatever impact they've made stays eternal, but who knows what else they would have accomplished. And you cut that off. So just an interesting thing to think about. And I thank God, I don't think we have temptations to end the person's life, but when we talk about the challenges of people in difficult medical situations and the like, this idea of Tzelem Elokim, that even if a person's quality of life is not what they're used to, but a comment, an action, a word, a smile, who knows what impact it can have. It's a worthwhile thing to think about. So we discussed what it means that God remembered the animals. We discussed if God said something to himself, so when it was revealed to humanity, and we discussed the Sforno about this idea of Tzelem Elokim. Any comments?